Chapter 1. The Stranger and the Bound Woman. The sun blazed mercilessly over the prairie, turning the sky into a sheet of fire. The dry wind carried the scent of horses, dust, and gun oil, while a lone hawk drifted in wide circles above the cracked earth. A woman was tied to an old wooden fence, wrists swollen, lips split, eyes half shut. Her dress hung in tatters, her skin caked with dirt and sweat from a full day beneath the burning sky. No food, no water, only the biting flies feeding on the dried blood around the ropes. Each breath she took came like a broken whisper. Her name was Eliza Monroe. Hours ago, her screams had faded into silence. No one had come. Now her cracked voice rasped out to the wind, a sound almost too dry to be human. Spread it open. Do it with force. The words came out broken, desperate. Not a plea for shame, but for freedom. She was begging for the rope to be cut, for the pain to stop. The wind carried her voice across the barren land until it reached a creaking wagon moving slowly up the trail. A tall man sat at the reins, hat pulled low over a sun-scorched face. Jackson Hale, 48 years old. A rancher once before life stripped him bare. His land, his cattle, his pride, all gone. This journey was meant to be a new beginning. The small cabin ahead was his chance to start over. Bought sight unseen from a desperate seller in town. He remembered the man's uneasy warning. Careful. Hale, folks around here don't take kindly to strangers buying what wasn't theirs to sell. He'd laughed it off then, brushing the words away like bar talk over whiskey. But now, as the valley spread silent before him, he couldn't shake the echo of that warning. When Jackson reached the cabin, the air shimmered like heat off steel. Smoke drifted faintly from the chimney. Someone was there. Then faintly he heard it. A cry. Human. Weak. He jumped down, boots hitting the dust, scanning the fence line. At first he thought the heat was playing tricks on his eyes. Then he saw her, Eliza, tied, bleeding, barely breathing. Jackson's throat tightened. He drew his knife and stepped closer. Her eyes fluttered open just enough to see him. Spread it open. Do it with force. He froze, confusion flickering, until he saw the ropes cutting deep into her wrists. One clean slice and she crumpled into his arms, weightless as air. As she fell, her trembling hands went instinctively to her stomach, shielding something unseen. Jackson noticed, but didn't yet understand. My baby has to live, she whispered, voice fading like smoke. Jackson went still, the knife trembling in his grip. A voice from long ago echoed in his mind, in his brother Samuel's words. Out here, you don't ride past someone in trouble, brother. Maybe that's why he didn't leave her, even half-conscious. Eliza tried to rise, her knees giving out. She reached for the fence, refusing to stay down. Jackson caught her again, steadying her. Behind those exhausted eyes burned a stubborn fire, the kind that refuses to die. Inside the cabin, he laid her gently on the floor, poured a few drops of water on her lips. He dipped a rag in the water bucket and pressed it to her forehead. Her skin burned with fever, her breath shallow. Every now and then she murmured something soft, words too faint to catch. Jackson sat quietly beside her, listening to the drone of flies outside. When her eyes finally opened, she whispered, "Thank you." He leaned closer. "Who's coming after you? Who did this?" Her gaze drifted to the door. "They'll find me," she murmured. "They always do." A chill crawled up Jackson's spine. Whoever they were, they weren't far. The next morning, the cabin smelled of coffee and dust. Jackson sat at the table, hat resting beside him, worry written across his weathered face. He'd cleaned her wounds, bandaged her wrists with torn cloth from his own shirt. The air outside shimmered like molten glass. Eliza stirred, trying to sit up. "Where am I? Why did you help me?" Jackson poured her a tin cup of water. His voice was low, steady. "You were tied to my fence. I couldn't just ride by." Her trembling hands wrapped around the cup and she drank slowly, each sip like mercy itself. "Why'd you buy land out here?" she asked after a moment. "It's nothing but dust and ghosts." He shrugged, eyes fixed on the horizon. "Needed a place where the past couldn't find me." A faint, bitter smile tugged at her lips. "Guess I was running from mine too." For a moment, silence filled the room, heavy but not cold. Two souls, both hiding from something they couldn't forget. Then her voice dropped. "They'll be back soon." "Who's they?" "Your family." She shook her head. "No, the kind of men who don't stop until they get what they came for." Jackson turned toward the window. Down the trail, a cloud of dust rose in the heat. Riders. He stood slowly, reaching for the rifle on the wall. The wood groaned beneath his boots as the shadow of danger crept closer. Chapter 2. The Man with the Black Coat. The sharp click of metal broke the silence as Jackson pulled back the lever on his rifle. Outside, horses snorted, hooves scraping the hard ground like sparks waiting to fly. Eliza went pale. Her breathing turned shallow. "They've found me," she whispered. Jackson moved to the window, parting the curtain just enough to see. 3 riders came into view, cutting through the heat haze. The one in front rode straight and tall, a black coat, a darker beard, the kind of man you recognized instantly as trouble. "That's him," Eliza said, voice trembling. "Malcolm Vane, the man who did this to me." Jackson's jaw locked tight. He knew that name, whispered in every saloon and land office across the frontier. Malcolm Vane, the land baron who made people disappear when they refused to sell. And now, he was riding right into Jackson's yard. Jackson turned to the table, loading shells one by one into his rifle. "You stay here," he said quietly. But Eliza grabbed his sleeve, her fingers cold and shaking. "You can't fight him," she pleaded. "You don't know what he's capable of." Jackson met her eyes, calm, steady. "I've known his kind all my life." Outside, the horses stopped. Boots hit the ground. Voices carried through the thick heat. "Come on out, Hale, we know you're in there." Jackson froze. They knew his name. He turned sharply toward Eliza. "What did you tell him?" Her eyes went wide, panic flooding her face. "I swear I didn't, but he always finds out." A heavy knock shook the door. Then another, louder, harder. The cabin walls rattled. Malcolm's voice boomed through the heat. "Eliza, you've made me chase you long enough. Come on out now before somebody gets hurt." Jackson steadied his breathing, hand tight on the rifle. "If you open that door," Eliza whispered, "you'll never close it again." Another crash. The hinges groaned, and then the door flew open. 3 men stepped inside, dust swirling around their boots like storm clouds. The one in the center filled the doorway. Broad shoulders, a cruel smirk, eyes like cold iron. "Well now," Malcolm drawled, "there's my runaway wife." Eliza froze. Her hands clenched together, trembling. Jackson took a step forward, rifle low but ready. "This is private property," he said, his voice even. Malcolm smiled, a slow, empty grin that never touched his eyes. "Everything I touch is mine, that woman included." Jackson felt the old fire rising in him, the same rage that had burned when he lost everything he loved. He forced his voice to stay steady. "The lady says she's not your wife." Malcolm's smile faded. His tone turned sharp. "The law says otherwise." One of his men, a thin, scar-faced rider, took a step forward, hand hovering near his pistol. Jackson didn't flinch, didn't blink. Something deep in his gut told him this wasn't about marriage or property. This was something darker. Malcolm paced a few steps inside, eyes roaming the cabin. "You know, Hale," he said almost lazily, "you remind me of a rancher I once met up north. Stubborn old fool, thought land and honor were worth dying for." Jackson's heart pounded. Samuel Hale, Malcolm's grin widened. Yeah, that was his name. The world tilted. Jackson's brother. The same Samuel found dead 6 months ago, shot down on a lonely trail near Malcolm's land. Jackson's voice turned cold. "What did you just say?" Malcolm's grin sharpened. Guess he should have sold when he had the chance. The air went still. Jackson's hand dropped to his revolver. Malcolm raised a hand. "Hold on now. Let's do this proper." He shrugged off his coat, the sun glinting on the steel at his hip. "You and me. One draw, one chance. You win, I ride away. I win. The woman comes home." Eliza stepped forward, her voice breaking. "No, he'll kill you." Jackson's eyes stayed locked on Malcolm's. "He already killed my brother." They walked out into the open sun. The world felt smaller, hotter, tighter. Malcolm's smile oozed confidence. He was sure this would end his way. But Jackson wasn't fighting for pride anymore. He was fighting for justice. The air thickened. The prairie held its breath. He could hear his own heartbeat, steady, slow. Malcolm's hand twitched. His smirk widened. The wind stilled. A hawk cried somewhere far off, then silence. 1. Jackson's fingers twitched. 2. Sweat slid down his cheek, stinging the cut on his lip. 2 men, 1 line, life or death between them. 3. A flash split the air. White, blinding, final. The world exploded. And if you've made it this far, take a deep breath. Maybe a slow sip of tea. You'll need it for what comes next. Chapter 3. Fire, Justice, and the Dawn Go On. Take a breath. Before we ride further into this story, tell me something. What time is it where you are? And where are you listening from? If you love tales of courage and justice born out on the old frontier, hit that subscribe button, and because what happens next, you won't want to miss. The gunshot echoed across the plains. Dust hung in the air like smoke after a wildfire. When it finally cleared, Malcolm Vane lay sprawled in the dirt, gun half drawn, pride bleeding out into the dry earth. Jackson stood over him, chest rising and falling, the sharp scent of gunpowder clinging to the wind. For a long, heavy moment, the world held its breath. Then Eliza burst from the cabin, tears streaking down her face. Jackson slowly lowered his rifle. "It's over," he whispered. But the danger wasn't gone. One of Malcolm's men shouted, reaching for his gun. A crack split the air. The man dropped, clutching his arm. Eliza stood in the doorway, the old rifle still smoking in her hands. Her voice was steady, her aim flawless. "The next shot," she said coldly, "won't miss." Jackson looked at her, really looked. The fragile woman he'd found tied to his fence was gone. In her place stood someone fierce, calm, unbroken. He walked toward her, breath still uneven. "Where'd you learn to shoot like that?" She stared at the rifle for a moment. "My father," she said softly, before everything went bad. Inside the cabin, she sank into a chair, trembling hands pressed against her stomach. Jackson poured her water, but she pushed it away. His eyes narrowed. "You hurt?" She shook her head slowly. Then in a whisper, "I'm pregnant." The words landed like a stone in the quiet room. Jackson froze. All this time, she hadn't just been running from a cruel man. She'd been running for someone else. Her voice cracked. "It's not his baby. The man I loved? He died before he even knew. When Malcolm found out, he said the child would be his heir, whether I wanted it or not. I had to run. I had to keep my baby safe." Jackson stared into the fire, the flames reflecting in his eyes. He understood. She wasn't running away. She was protecting what little love she had left in this world. Outside, a horse neighed. Jackson looked through the window, saw movement on the trail. The glint of badges caught the sun. Lawmen. Eliza's fingers gripped his arm. "They'll never believe me," she said, panic rising. "They'll think I killed him." Jackson's chest tightened. He looked from her face to Malcolm's body lying still in the dust. The hardest fight, he realized, was just beginning, because out here, truth doesn't always matter. By the time the sun began to set, the lawmen had arrived. The air smelled of gunpowder and dry earth. Sheriff Morrison dismounted first, his sharp eyes sweeping the scene. The dead man, the woman with a rifle, and Jackson standing silently beside her. "That's Malcolm Vane, ain't it?" Morrison muttered. Everyone in these parts knew that name, and the friends he had in high places. One of the deputies spoke quickly, pointing toward Eliza. "Sheriff, I saw the woman with the rifle." "She shot him." Eliza's hands tightened on the gun, but she said nothing. Morrison turned his gaze to Jackson. "You a drifter, Hale? Or one of Vane's men?" Jackson reached into his vest and pulled out a silver pocket watch. "This belonged to my brother, Samuel Hale," he said. "Malcolm killed him." "Open it." The sheriff flipped it open. Inside, folded tight, was a small hidden map. His eyes widened. "You're Samuel's brother," Morrison said quietly. "I knew him. He was a good man." He listened to their story, saw the bruises on Eliza's wrists, the torn marriage papers, the watch, the proof. When he unfolded the small map and realized what it revealed, his face changed. Justice at last had a shape. 3 days later, Morrison's men uncovered a cave in the hills north of the cabin. Inside, stolen deeds, forged papers, and letters on the truth of Malcolm Vane's empire. He'd stolen water rights, threatened families, and silenced anyone who dared to resist. The law moved fast. Malcolm's partners were hunted down, and the land was restored to the people he'd wronged. Eliza's name was cleared. She wasn't a runaway anymore. She was a survivor. Weeks passed. Jackson rebuilt the cabin plank by plank. As summer turned to fall, peace returned to the valley. One quiet morning, with the dawn burning orange over the hills, Eliza was outside hanging laundry. She looked up and smiled softly. "The baby kicked for the first time today," she said. Jackson smiled beneath the brim of his hat. "What name are you thinking?" She touched her stomach gently. "If it's a boy, it's Samuel. For the man who made all this possible." Jackson nodded, his eyes misting. He looked out at the horizon. The same sky that had seen so much pain now glowed with a kind of mercy. Sometimes life takes everything from you, only to give back something better. Sometimes the road to peace runs straight through fire. And maybe that's the lesson here, and that courage isn't just about drawing a gun. It's about standing for what's right when no one else will, even after heartbreak, even after loss. Hope still finds its way home, so tell me, if you were Jackson, would you have risked it all for someone you barely knew? Would you have stood your ground for what's right? Take a slow breath. Let that thought settle. And if this story touched you, give it a like. Share it with someone who might need a spark of hope today. And don't forget to subscribe, because out here on the frontier, there are more stories waiting. Stories that remind us that no matter how dark the night gets, the dawn always finds its way.